Hello and welcome back to the American Superbike Show. I'm your host, Ditch Turner, and today we are very, very late. I know I said in the last episode that I only intend to put up, shows like every other week or so, but it's just not every day that the six-time MotoAmerica Superbike champion decides to change teams and move to another manufacturer, taking the number one plate with him. Now, right off the bat, you might be saying, dude, that was last Friday. Why are we recording this now on, Thursday, November 20th? The answer is I had questions about the trickle down effects from this signing. Even though I still don't have those answers, I finally decided I just wanted to kind of record something walking through the questions that I still have. First, we'll talk about the headline that I just alluded to, in that Cameron Beaubier has signed a deal to take his talents to Warhorse HSBK Ducati with Flow for Law. Benjamin Smith is also a part of that deal, as he has a long relationship with the folks at Flow for Law, which means that Cam will have a teammate again after riding solo last year. For those two riders, this is a move that makes sense in every way. Even though it is rare to see a current champion change brands, especially going from a bike that he just won the title on to a manufacturer he took it away from. I think there has been some red flags in his previous team, and that gave me the idea that it was really just a matter of when and not if Beaubier was going to have to find another ride at some point. And for Smith, this is probably going to be just a massive step up in the depth of the team that he has around him. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to bet that Benjamin will probably benefit from being on a higher level team that is going to propel him forward to the front of the field in 2026. Smith got a top 10 result in every single race that he finished in 2025. For 2026, I expect a lot more of those top 10s to be converted into top 5s and podiums. Now, from what I understand, Cameron is going to be heading over to, I believe, Spain in January to do some testing with the bike alongside the World Superbike team. I wouldn't read too much into that about, like maybe seeing that as a possibility of Ducati bringing Cam back to the international stage. I think Cam Beaubier is happy. He's happier with the Moto America travel schedule, especially with his young family. And plus, Ducati will be running a brand new for 2026 Panagale V4R, and that has a lot of updates over 2025 machine, including things like a double-sided swing arm. Ducati's probably just smartly gathering their top talent together to solve this new puzzle as a group. Okay, so that's like 3 minutes or less about two riders that are signing with a really good team. Cool. Why did it take me so long to put out a stupid episode about the biggest rider signing since Cam Beaubier came back to MotoAmerica in 2023? Well, the answer is I'm still trying to get a handle on the trickle-down effect from these signings. Now, I am sure that everyone that listens to this podcast probably also visits websites like thefantasticroadracingworld.com, or probably, easily learn about this signing from some sort of social media post. Those, that will probably have all the information that you really need about Beaubier and Smith signing with HSBK itself. What I want to explore is the remaining dominoes that I can currently see. And the first one of those is Josh Herrin. The two-time Superbike champion just won the championship in MotoAmerica's top class in 2024 for Ducati on this very team. But there was zero mention of Herrin in the press releases or social media posts about this signing. That tells me he's not going to be back with Warhorse HSBK next year, or at least for a full season of Superbike. Hopefully, the team was kind enough to give Josh a heads up at an early point in the shuffle to kind of give him all the time he possibly could to find another ride. Even if this did catch him off guard, it's still just, towards the end of November. We're still before Thanksgiving, so it gives him a good bit of time to get out there and at least put something together if he wants to. But, there's two questions that I just don't know the answer to, and it's a big reason why I didn't just rush out right away and try to put out some sort of quasi-emergency show. Those questions to me are need and want. Now, when I say need, I'm not trying to sit here and pocket watch saying that Josh Herrin is rich and doesn't need to work again. He may be, he may not be. I have zero clue. It's not my business, and that's not where I'm going with that. No, instead, I'm not entirely sure that Josh needs to find another ride because while he's not confirmed to be part of the team for next year, there's also no sort of confirmation that I can find that says that Josh Herrin is no longer part of the Ducati family. Not only was Josh Herrin riding a Ducati on race weekends, but Josh did a lot of sponsorship engagement events, including rides on and off the track. He has been a tremendous ambassador for the brand on the racetrack, winning Ducati's first American Superbike championship this century, and off track in every single way that you could ask of a rider. It is with that in mind that I think that there's a possibility that Josh will remain part of the Ducati family in some form or fashion. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I just find it hard to believe that with everything that Heron has done for the Italian brand over the last few years, that he would be back in this situation where he was before he went to Warhorse and having to scramble to put together one-year deals every offseason just to try and stay on the track. It is possible that that's the position that Ducati has left him in, but I would just find that hard to believe. I'm not fully ready to eliminate the possibility that Josh still finds himself riding a Ducati somewhere next year. Now, but other than the reason that Josh doesn't need a ride because maybe he already has one still, there is also the possibility that Josh Heron doesn't want to ride full time anymore. A handful of years ago, Josh settled down a bit. He got married, started a family. After having their first son, Griffin, last year the couple welcomed twins into the world. He's 35 years old with a young family of 5 and a hell of a list of accomplishments, literally racing all over the world. Nobody would blame him if he decided to hang up racing full time. There are some racers like Josh Hayes that would probably rather die than stop racing. There are other riders out there that realize that there's a lot more to life than racing. I'm not here to say which one is better than the other, or even that I know which way Josh Heron is leaning. But it is worth acknowledging that Josh Heron may decide to move on to another phase of his life. I would be sad. Excuse me. I would be sad to lose him on the grid, while at the same time, I admire the courage it takes to make that kind of decision. So that's, one of the first dominoes, and I'm still waiting. I'm not really sure how it's going to fall or even which way it's leaning. Uh, Before we move on from Warhorse and HSBK, entirely, I do also want to point out that Josh Heron is still not only the defending 200 Daytona 200 champion, but he's won the last 3 in a row. Even if he does press pause on his, full-time racing career, which I feel I must stress again is something that I'm just speculating at. But even if he does hang it up in regard to full season competition, would Josh Heron still come back to Daytona to try and defend his crown there? And if he does, would he again be doing it with the Warhorse team that he's won the last 3 races in a row with? Hell, I'm not even sure if Warhorse is going to continue running a super sport bike at all. From my understanding, last year, when the team they wasn't intending to even go to Daytona weekend at all before changing their mind kind of last minute. Remember though that last year Daytona did not count towards any of the championship standings, and this year it does count towards Super Sport Championship. Now, I'm pretty sure Cameron Peterson is no longer with the team after last year being their lone Super Sport competitor for the full championship. I was convinced from the start of the year that he was going to be replaced regardless of what happened by the hot up-and-coming kid Alessandro Di Mario, who had developed a warm relationship with Mr. Ferracci himself. Instead, Alessandro Di Mario, he's going to be running Ducati for the Rahal Ducati Moto with XPEL team, alongside Kayla Yakov as his teammate. Without a Supersport rider confirmed for a full season ride, there really won't be a reason for Warhorse to even, go to Daytona in no racing capacity, since they don't really run any of the other classes that are going to be competing that weekend. So it's not like they'll be able to just throw another Ducati Panagale V4R on the truck for Josh, at Daytona. So my hope, and let me emphasize, again here that it's hope, but I hope that Josh is at least a driving factor in this decision, if not the driving factor. By that, I mean that I hope that Josh is ready to call time on what was an amazing career on the racetrack to focus on his career of being an amazing dad and husband. But I also hope he comes to Daytona to at least try and be the first person to win 4 in a row. I met Josh at the pits during the super long and boring rain delay before the 200 in 2022. He was a really nice and approachable guy, and I even took a selfie with him that I regret I no longer have due to some, technical errors on my part. But, that's what I'm hoping for is probably a best case scenario. And I don't think I'm just out here whiling coming up with this stuff all on my own, because Josh has made some remarks at a couple of rounds this past season that at least gave me the impression that putting his career on pause is something that he has on his mind. So now let's look at the team that lost its rider today. Tytler Cycle BMW joined the MotoAmerica paddock a handful of years ago, and while they weren't the first team to bring a BMW to MotoAmerica, they were the first team to win races with the M1000RR. Tytler's was the landing spot for Cameron Beaubier when he returned to MotoAmerica from running around the world in the Moto2 Championship in 2023. His first year back was also that first year that MotoAmerica started transitioning to the same gearbox style with the neutral lockout that World Superbike uses. And I remember this because that produced a situation where Stefano Mesa completed the last couple of rounds of the season on Beaubier's bike because it was the only bike on that team that was declared from the top of the season to be the full current spec. You couldn't switch back and forth once the season started. PJ Jacobson was one of his teammates that year, but PJ's bike was basically the 2022 spec bike, so he couldn't switch to the new transmission mid-year, while Corey Alexander was another teammate, but his bike was barely above stock 1000 machine. So when Beaubier sat out the end of 2023 to recover from his injuries, neither of his teammates could ride his bike for him, and by the current rules in force at the time, so Mesa had to step up from Supersport to fill in for the last two rounds. Speaking of which, I hope Mesa's back next year. I miss him. I've reached out to him, and I really hope to hear back from him. Maybe I really hope he finds a place back in the paddock for 2026. Anyways, I didn't think it was a good idea at the time for Tytler Cycle to be running three different bikes at such an obvious different levels of tune because the bikes were so drastically different that you had to wonder if the data was able to be shared in any sort of way that was useful between the teams, between the riders. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head if this was before or after the 2024 season, but it was around then that I started hearing the rumors and rumblings that the team might not return to MotoAmerica at all. What I had heard at the time was that the team owner was just not happy about the lack of sponsorship that was coming in. And he wasn't really keen on just continuing to fund the operation out of his pocket, which that's understandable. It's hard to remember sometimes when we were talking about our interests and passions like motorcycle racing that at this level it is a business. Teams cannot and should not be expected to operate on acts of charity. There must be some form of return on their massive investment. It would be awesome if we could just focus on the competitive aspect of the sport and let it be the driving factor, ignoring all the financials, but it would also be very naive, in my opinion, to expect that to happen anytime soon in the world we currently live in. But it doesn't really matter if it was before or after 2024 that I was hearing those rumblings, because the one thing that I remember specifically was that the team was considering ending its participation in Superbike despite still having Cam Beaubier under contract for another season. Now that's a gigantic red flag to me. When the team that's currently running the then five-time Superbike champion, and they have him under contract for another season to come, yet they're still considering just pulling out instead. All of that is just say that I was absolutely not surprised to find that Beaubier was looking for a ride somewhere else, despite delivering the second American Superbike championship for BMW ever, and its first in 50 years. I don't blame it at all for not feeling settled in that sort of situation. Plus, I just never really got the impression he was truly comfortable in the BMW machine itself. He just won the championship last year because he's Cameron freaking Beaubier, and that's what he does. So, I think that begs to ask the question, is Tytler Cycle returning to Superbike at all next year? In consecutive years, they've gone from three bikes down to two, then down to one, where they won the Superbike championship, and now the guy that made that all happen left. I have no confirmations, but I would be surprised if they are not done. I also think that with Beaubier's departure and Tytler Cycle most likely not returning, that it makes the new Superbike seats. I'm still unsure of the number of Superbike entries that the Orange Cat Racing team will have. They have been competing in Stock 1000 level for years with two bikes, and last year they were occupied by Jason Uribe and the Stock 1000 champion for 2025, Andrew Lee. But the team showed up at the final Superbike round of the season, New Jersey Motorsports Park, after wrapping up the Stock 1000 title. They showed up there with two Superbike entries for their riders and plans to compete in a full Superbike schedule next year. So at the time, I thought it would be a slam dunk for all sides to just have their two riders both carry on with the team for 2026. Hopefully both on superbikes, but maybe if they have to, one on a full-blown superbike and a second one in a stock 1000 machine to kind of, way like the Real Steel Honda team did moving up to superbike last season with more of a soft transition for their two-rider team. But now my thinking on that might have changed a little bit because I think if Tytler's really isn't coming back, then Orange Cat might be the best BMW ride in the paddock for 2026, even if it's not a complete superbike. Does that maybe make the team more of an appealing place, especially for someone like Mark Vandermark, who, or what's his name, Vandermark from World Superbike BMW factory team? Uh, it's long known that they were parting ways after the end in the last season, and but it seemed like a very amicable split from, and so because of that one, would BMW be keen in helping Van den Mark making the transition to MotoAmerica like he has been very vocal about wanting to do? And two, if BMW is interested in doing that to help fill the void with the departure of Beaubier, would they help him transition to a seat at Tyler Cycle or the Orange Cat Racing Team? That to me is a fascinating question raised by this possibility. Now, I should probably take a second to just go ahead and point out that while I may have been a little bit critical of Tyler Cycle for competing with different bikes that were built to different levels of tune in the same class, I think there's a big difference here in that Tytler's had already been in the superbike class for a few years at that point, while Orange Cat's making the transition up for the first time next season. So to me, that's where it becomes a little bit of apples and oranges. At the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see how BMW wishes to handle this at the factory level. There is always also the possibility that BMW may just happily take their fresh new title and take another break from direct support in American road racing. I also want to go ahead and take a second since we were talking about BMWs, just to give a shout out to Top Pro Motorsports. I have seen on Instagram where they're looking for a buyer for Sean Dillon Kelly's old M1000RR from the 2024 season. So I guess that means I should probably start to give up hope that Alex Arango is just going to find a sponsor to bring that machine back to the paddock. And that's a shame. I think he made the paddock better, and I hope we get to at least see him continue on in Stock 1000. I also hope that same fate doesn't befall the ADR team. That's the team that ran the Yamaha R1 for Smith last year with the Flow for Law sponsorship. In an article that's still up on MotoAmerica.com that was written by Sean Bice before the COTA round this past season, in the opening paragraph it says that ADR and Flow for Law had, quote, solid plans to continue the relationship in 2026, unquote. Apparently, a hell of a lot has changed in the few months since that article came out, and I hope that ADR isn't left in the cold because of it. So that's where we currently sit. Anytime a six-time champion changes teams, it's going to be a big deal. And in this case, there are still many reverberations from this announcement that are going to be yet to come. In the meantime, I haven't even started looking at the 2025 Super Sport season yet to kind of begin putting the recap episode together. But I should be able to still kind of work on that and get it put out next week on schedule. And who knows? Now that this initial domino has kind of been tipped, maybe we can hopefully begin to get like a steady trickle of silly season announcements, so that maybe I can try to keep recording on a weekly basis. They may be shortish episodes, but I rarely record anything over 20 minutes anyways. Honestly, I love Moto America, and I want to share that love with you. I never really thought that I would ever have the possibility of having enough of a show to record on a weekly basis, but all of a sudden, it seems like that might have changed. It's exciting, and it's a hell of a time to be a fan of American Superbike racing and Moto America in general. So long, everyone.